Last video, we talked about how I acquired the property, who it was that I acquired it from, the history of the property and all of that, and what the plans were to do with the property. We also went through what happened with the eviction, which was unfortunate, but we did have to evict the tenants that were there. And it basically took all of 2019 to get that process done. So from buying the process to getting the tenants out. So now we're going to talk about what happened in 2020. And that was a whole new set of challenges. Boom! What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Joannis or Joe Hotagua. I'm a Sierra Leonean American in West Africa. And if you want to know what it's like to build a house in Africa, then this is the video for you. All right, cool. So this is part 2 in my series of building a house in Africa, and specifically in Sierra Leone. So as I mentioned, in 2019, I was there from December to January, like basically about 9 days, but just kind of overlapping with New Year's. I went back in May, and then I came back in December again, and then left in early January of 2020. So I walked into 2020 with the full expectation that we were going to build a wall in May, because you have to build kind of a wall around your property. And then I was going to build the caretaker's quarters, or what we call the boys' quarters, in December of 2020. That was the plan as of January 3rd, when I came back, of 2020. Well, I quit my job January 26th of 2020 to focus on, really like advising and focusing on the continent and potentially moving to West Africa. But at that time, I needed to focus my energies and intention on West Africa. And so that's really where my mind was. So I left my job in January of 2020. No problem. I walked away with a severance package. I had money saved up. I had a bunch of other things planned in terms of consulting gigs. And even some sales that I was going to do. So I was really, really excited about the next stage in my career. And so the plan was to go back in May, and we were going to find me a contractor, and I was going to start the process of building the fence or the wall around the property. Now, the reason why I'm saying fence and wall is because in Sierra Leone, we call them the fence. You're calling it a fence around your property. But like most people think of a fence as like a white picket fence, right? When we're talking about a fence in this sense, it is a cement and concrete wall. So there's concrete on the side of it for the gutters so that water, is flowing around the property during the rainy season. It has a path away from your property. And then it's cement blocks that are up. And it's about 10 to 15 feet high. So, but to get to that, first, we needed to demolish the house, the board house that I mentioned before. We had to do that. And then we also had to build what they call a PanBody. The PanBody is like, basically, it's a temporary house that can last for about 2-3 years, even longer sometimes. People stay in them for quite a long time. But that's where your caretaker who lives on the property, before there's a fence built, you have to have somebody on the property to be able to watch over the property every day, right? People aren't going to be stealing materials or trying to live on your land if there's somebody already there. They're just not going to do that. And so we needed to get through that process. But first, we had to tear down the house. So, we have a family friend who actually grew up in that house. So he helped us find some people to demolish the boros. Let me take a step back. So the pandemic hit in March of 2020, right, in the US. And so that meant that my travel to Sierra Leone was suspended indefinitely. I didn't know when I was going to be going back to Sierra Leone. However, the show must go on. Things still need to happen. So I was project managing this remotely. And we had a family, my mom's cousin, who lived there locally. He basically was the person on the ground helping the process. I will say to all of you out there, if you're thinking about building in West Africa, specifically in Sierra Leone, and especially, you need to be there in person. Anybody would tell you that, even anywhere in the world, that's important. But even if you have a family friend that's in charge, there are just things sometimes that might get missed, questions that might not get asked, and things that you might not really know until you get there later. So for instance, we go through the process of tearing down the house. There was a electrical cord that came from the main power line into the house. There was also a meter that was already there. So technically, I could have just had that added to the PanBody when the PanBody was going to be built. Unfortunately, the person who was overseeing the process did not think to even request that or ask for it. They took the meter, they took the cord, everything went to the electric company. And so now I have to go through the process of securing those things now for new buildings on the property. However, the house was destructed within about a 2-week span, and some of the elements from that were used to build the boys' quarters. And so some of the elements from that were used to build what we call the PanBody. So the PanBody is basically a temporary housing situation for your person who's living on the property, right? So it's like a studio apartment. It's about I think it was 10 by 10 or 11 by 11 feet. And then there is a storage unit, which is 10 by 20 or like 11 by 20 feet. So you can store all the materials for the building materials in that place. So we took some of the materials from the boros, the main board house, and that was stored and used to start to build the PanBody. We also built out a kitchen for the caretaker so that he and his wife could make food and so that they could, basically survive. We already had outhouses on the property, and so those were there. And so the process of building the PanBody, well, first of all, the process of demolishing the main house, like I said, went pretty quickly. The process for building the PanBody took a little bit of time and energy and effort. And, you start with getting a contractor who's going to give you an estimate, right? Instead of using like a big contractor to do it, they use some local guys. And so those guys were like, all right, here's the quote. So the original quote, I think, was about $500. It ended up costing like $900 to build. And that's because, if you're not there in person and you're not stern and strict about what everything is needed early on, you have people playing games and doing all these other kinds of things. And that was the first mistake that I made. It almost ended up costing double what was quoted to me in the beginning. So I would definitely make that recommendation to you, like be there in person and be very strict and stern about what you're looking for. No exceptions. Because if you do that, you'll make sure that you get the most out of the situation. But in the end, look, the PanBody is working out just fine. I'm storing some stuff in the storage unit. My caretaker lives there. He's been living there since May of 2020. And so it's definitely been great for him because he doesn't have to pay rent anymore. So he's living rent free. So that's been great. Him and his wife have been able to live rent free. I'm not charging them rent because they're caretakers, and everything that needs to be done in the property, they're taking care of it. When it's cleaning, watching the people that are doing the work and all of that. So we did 3 things in this second stage in 2020. We had to demolish the house. We built the PanBody. And then lastly, cut down the dita tree. So the dita tree I mentioned in the last video was kind of a staple of that community. And unfortunately, it did have to be brought down in order to be able to start building on the property. So they brought a guy in to cut it down. And so now it's just a tree stump there. And I am going to reuse that tree stump, as I mentioned, as a coffee table in the living room on the first floor. So that's what happened throughout 2020. So basically throughout the month of April through June was kind of where we did everything from tearing down the tree, tearing down the boros, and building up the PanBody. All right, guys, so that was part 2. Now in part 3, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through what I did to find the contractor that I ended up using and to start the process of building the wall. That was a whole ordeal. All right, guys, see you on the next video. All right, guys, if you like this video, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, like, comment, and share it with your friends. All right, see you on the next video.